The sky was a roiling mass of dark clouds, angry and restless. Lightning ripped across the heavens, illuminating the dense pine forest with fleeting, jagged flashes of white-blue light. The storm had been building all afternoon, but now it was fully unleashed. Rain pelting down in sheets and thunder shaking the earth. Ethan adjusted the straps on his backpack, his fingers numb from the cold and damp. He was deep in the woods, miles from the nearest road or human habitation, alone by choice. Camping was his escape, a way to disconnect from the noisy city, from deadlines and expectations. But tonight, as the storm raged around him, a creeping unease gnawed at his mind. His tent stood pitched in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, their needles dripping water that shimmered in the occasional lightning flash. Ethan had arrived late, just before the storm turned fierce. He had hoped for a quiet night, lulled by the rain and the distant crack of thunder. But something felt different. He sat inside the tent, flashlight in hand, checking his gear. The howling wind tugged at the fabric, making the tent flap wildly. The rain beat like drumming fingers on the nylon. He could hear the occasional snap of branches as the wind wrestled with the trees. Then, faintly, a rustling beyond the clearing caught his attention. He froze, listening. The wind masked many sounds. Branches swaying, animals scurrying for shelter, but this was different. A soft, deliberate crunch, like footsteps on wet pine needles. Ethan's heart quickened. He flicked on his flashlight and peered out through the tent's mesh window, sweeping the beam across the forest floor. The rain blurred the view, but there was nothing unusual, just dark tree trunks and undergrowth. Probably just a deer. He told himself, trying to calm the sudden rush of adrenaline. Lightning flashed again, revealing the outlines of the forest. And for a moment, just a brief heartbeat. Ethan swore he saw a pair of eyes staring back at him from the shadows. Reflecting the lightning's glow, he blinked, and the eyes vanished. He swallowed hard. "Get a grip," he muttered. "It's just your imagination." Still, the feeling persisted. That prickling sensation on the back of his neck, the sense of being watched. Hours passed. The storm showed no sign of weakening. Every thunderclap seemed closer, louder, as if the sky itself was angry and venting its fury. Ethan struggled too. Sleep. He lay on his sleeping bag, eyes wide open, listening. Occasionally the footsteps returned, always distant. Always just beyond the clearing dot. At one point, a low growl pierced the storm's roar, deep and guttural, and Ethan's blood ran. Cold. It wasn't a wolf or any animal he recognized. It sounded unnatural. He grabbed his small camping knife, his hands trembling. Lightning cracked overhead, and in the sudden illumination, the forest seemed alive with movement. Shadows shifted unnaturally, stretching and twisting. Suddenly, a figure dashed past the edge of the clearing. Quick, dark, almost a blur. Ethan shouted, but the figure disappeared into the trees like smoke. He was not alone. The storm was no longer just a storm. It had become a backdrop to something far, more sinister. The hours dragged on like an eternity. Ethan's nerves frayed with every crack of thunder. His mind raced with thoughts he tried to suppress. What if he wasn't alone? What if something in the woods was watching, waiting? The flashlight flickered and died. Panic surged as the tent was plunged into near darkness. Save for the storm's sporadic lightning, he fumbled with the spare batteries. Hands slick with rain and sweat. A sudden bang against the tent startled him. His heart nearly stopped. "Who's there?" He shouted into the darkness. No reply. Only the storm's furious symphony, determined not to give in to fear. Ethan unzipped the tent flap slightly and peered out. The forest was a chaotic blur of rain and shadows. Then, in the corner of his eye, movement. Fast. Silent. He whipped around with his knife raised, but saw nothing. Trying to steady his breath, Ethan grabbed his phone, hoping for a signal to call for help, but there was none. He was completely isolated. The night deepened. Lightning cracked closer, thunder booming overhead. Suddenly, through the trees, a silhouette appeared tall. Humanoid, but Distorted, too thin, too elongated. It moved unnaturally fast, vanishing as lightning struck again. Ethan's mind reeled. Was it an animal? A person? Or something else? His instincts screamed to run, but where? The forest around him was a maze, slick with rain and shadows. His only shelter was the fragile tent that shuddered in the storm's fury. He stayed frozen, knife in hand, eyes scanning the darkness. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched into hours. Ethan's flashlight came back on, flickering weakly. He shone it toward the far edge of the clearing. There, just beyond the tree line, two glowing eyes stared back. He gasped. The eyes blinked once, twice, then disappeared. But now he knew he was being watched. The growls came again, louder and closer. Ethan stumbled backward, tripping over roots and branches. His breath came in ragged gasps. The rain blurred his vision, mixing with tears of terror. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the figure again, this time closer, clearer. A pale face, gaunt and twisted. Eyes black as night. It moved with jerky, unnatural motions, coming toward the tent. Ethan scrambled inside, slamming the flap shut and zipping it tight. His heart pounded like a drum. He heard scratching on the tent's outer fabric, nails, claws, something desperate. He pressed against the wall, clutching his knife. The scratching grew frantic, then abruptly stopped. Silence. Minutes passed. Then a final bone-chilling growl, and nothing. Dawn broke slowly. The storm abating, Ethan emerged cautiously from his tent, drenched and exhausted. The forest looked normal, peaceful almost, but the muddy ground near his tent showed strange, large footprints, elongated, clawed. He packed his gear hastily. As he hiked back to civilization. Ethan knew one thing. He had come face to face with something beyond explanation, and the woods were still watching. The wind howled outside the isolated country house, rattling the windows and bending the tall oaks surrounding the property. Dark storm clouds gathered thick and low, pregnant with lightning ready to split the sky open. Inside, the Miller family, Sarah, her husband David, and their two children were gathered in the living room, watching the storm roll in. It had been an unusually hot and humid day, and the approaching thunderstorm brought a welcome chill. But as the first fat drops began to tap against the window panes, the power suddenly flickered and then went out entirely. The house plunged into darkness, save for the occasional flash of lightning that briefly illuminated the room. David sighed. Looks like we're in for a long night. Sarah lit some candles and placed them on the coffee table. The children clung close to their parents, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the storm intensified. Lightning crackled, thunder rolled across the sky, and sheets of rain hammered the roof. The trees groaned and bent in the wind. As the family settled down. A strange feeling crept over Sarah. The storm was fierce. Yes, but there was something else, a subtle presence lurking just beyond the window. She tried to shake it off. Probably just nerves, she whispered to herself. The night deepened. The children had fallen asleep, lulled by the storm's relentless rhythm. Sarah and David sat quietly, talking in hushed voices. Suddenly, Sarah froze. A faint noise came from outside, the soft scrape of something dragging across the porch. Her heart quickened. David glanced toward the window, then stood. I'll check it out. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside into the downpour. Sarah watched through the window as David moved slowly along the porch. The beam of light cutting through the rain. Nothing here, he called back. But then he stopped, shining the light toward the edge of the porch. There, just beyond the porch railing, a dark figure stood motionless. David froze. The figure was tall and thin, wearing a dark cloak that seemed soaked by the rain. Its face was obscured by shadows. Lightning flashed, illuminating the figure for a split second. David gasped. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It just stared. Then, without warning, it vanished into the storm. David ran back inside, locking the door behind him. The family huddled together, the storm raging outside and the power still out. Sarah's mind raced. Who or what had been on the porch? The children were restless now, waking and sensing the tension. David tried to reassure them. It was probably someone lost in the storm, maybe a traveler. But Sarah wasn't convinced. Hours passed. The storm showed no sign of lighting up. Then. Another sound. It came from the side of the house, a slow, deliberate tapping on the window. Sarah's blood ran cold. She turned toward the window. Lightning cracked, briefly illuminating. The garden in there, pressed against the glass, was the face pale, wet, and staring directly at her. No eyes. Just empty, dark sockets. Sarah screamed. David rushed over, pulling her away. They called the police once the storm eased, but no one was found nearby. The power returned just before dawn, and the house looked normal again, except for the muddy footprints. On the porch, long and narrow, with strange claw-like marks Sarah never forgot that night, or the visitor who came during the storm. The rain hit the windshield like a barrage of pebbles. Visibility was down to just a few feet, and the thunder cracked so loudly it felt like the car was being shaken from above. Mark leaned forward, squinting into the sheets of rain as his wipers worked at full speed. The country road he was driving on had long since turned into an unlit, winding trail surrounded by dense woods on both sides. There were no lights, no signs, no houses, just trees and darkness. He'd left the city hours ago, heading to visit his cousin's cabin for the weekend, but he'd taken a wrong turn somewhere, and now his GPS had no signal. To make things worse, his fuel gauge had dipped below a quarter, and his phone was at 6%. This was a mistake, he muttered, slowing down even more as another blinding bolt of lightning cracked through the trees. A few more miles down the road, the engine sputtered, then died. The headlights faded, and the car fell into complete silence. The storm raging around it. Mark sat there, stunned. No engine, no lights, no phone service. Alone in the middle of nowhere. In a thunderstorm. He took a deep breath and turned the key again. Nothing. Just the hollow sound of failure. I need to find help, he said out loud, trying to push back the fear that crept up his spine. He put on his raincoat, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped out into the storm. The road stretched behind him and ahead, both directions disappearing into sheets of rain and swaying trees. He decided to walk forward. Maybe a house or a gas station would appear soon. But as he walked, a new noise cut through the wind. A clicking sound, sharp, rhythmic, like stones tapping together, but mechanical, almost deliberate. Mark stopped, spinning around with the flashlight. Nothing. Just trees and rain. He kept walking, trying not to let his imagination take over, but every few steps he'd hear the sound again. Closer this time. Click, dash, click, dash, click. He spun again. Nothing. And then during a lightning flash, he caught a glimpse of something or someone across the road, standing perfectly still behind the trees. A figure just standing there. By the time he aimed the flashlight in that direction, it was gone. He began to walk faster. The road dipped into a small valley where water pooled at his ankles. His boots were soaked, and his flashlight started flickering. Click, dash, click, dash, click. Behind him again. He turned and shouted into the rain. Who's there? Silence. But now something new. Faint lights. Just up the road. A house. He broke into a jog, heart pounding, lungs burning from the wet air. The lights were faint, flickering through the trees like lanterns. As he got closer, he realized they weren't from a house. They were floating. Moving. Slowly. Like someone holding lanterns and walking. Deeper into the woods. Then they stopped. He stood at the edge of the road, staring into the forest. The lights hovered motionless. Lightning flashed again, and he saw the outlines of three figures. Tall, thin, unmoving. Their heads all turned toward him. Mark stumbled back. The lights went out. The forest returned to black. He turned and ran. Back the way he came. He didn't know how far. His legs hurt, his breath heaved, but fear carried him forward. Eventually, he saw the shape of his car in the distance. He rushed up, yanked the door open, and slammed it shut behind him. We're still in the ignition. He turned them again, one last desperate time. The engine started. Relief flooded his body. But it was short-lived, because as the headlights came on, someone was standing right in front of the car. A man, or something like a man, soaked in black, head slightly tilted. Expressionless. The same empty gaze he'd seen in the woods. Mark screamed and floored the gas, but the car didn't move. The tires spun stuck in mud. He looked up again. The figure was gone. But when he turned to look through the side window, it was standing just inches away, staring in. He didn't remember passing out, but when he woke up, it was morning. Bright, warm sunlight poured through the windshield. Birds chirped. The storm had vanished like a dream. His car started instantly. The road looked normal. The forest calm. Mark drove away without looking back. But later, when he stopped for gas, he noticed something strange on his back seat. Pine needles. Fresh ones, still wet with morning dew.